They didn't swear in whether.
Yeah, not till next month.
Fine.
We'll be up to 6.
More than six?
No, we'll be up to 6.
Oh.
Next month. Well, that's it. Hopefully. Oh, somebody and you, yeah. Which building? Bill Vizaris. Wonderful. And me and Marty. No. Yeah. Huh? Oh, really? Oh, they come. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, this one. Thank you. Where's the agenda? Oh,
Okay, okay. Hi, Gail.
How are you?
Want to speak?
No, I just want to listen. We haven't met in a couple of weeks, right?
Yeah,
Oh, I remember
yeah,
you.
yeah.
Okay. Hey, Mike, how are you? The zoning commission people.
Yeah.
Are you gonna speak to them?
Um,
Okay, then I want to speak.
There we go.
I want to speak. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, fill out the thank you.
Okay.
We're doing it.
Thank you. Just came from another parent meeting.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I'm on my bike and I'll just show it. Hi.
Did you ride your bike or did you drive?
I rode my bike.
Oh, okay.
We're supposed to be a bike riding city, right? Okay. Yeah, your turn. All right. Give it to you.
Can you hear me talking? Yes. Yes. Can you hear me talking? Testing, testing. Can you hear?
Yeah.
Okay, we're good. Ramon?
This is the regular meeting of the Arts and Culture Commission. Today is Thursday, June 19th, 2025. Madam Recording Secretary, please take roll call.
Commissioner Russell?
Here.
Commissioner Wu?
Here.
Commissioner Lopez Guerra? Commissioner Hernandez?
Here.
Commissioner Ochoa?
Here.
Thank you. Have quorum.
Seeing a quorum, this meeting is officially called to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. You may be seated. At this time, members of the public may address the Arts and Culture Commission regarding any non-agenda items within the subject matter jurisdiction of the committee. No action may be taken on non-agenda items unless authorized by law. Does the public have any comments they wish to share with the commission? Please know that you have 3 minutes to speak.
Gail Olivos, go ahead.
Sorry. My name is Gail Lewis. I'm in Ward 5. You already know how long I've been in Santa Ana. First of all, last time that I saw this team, you were going over the presentations from the various community members who are awarded grants from the Arts and Commission. And I wanted to point out that one that I just really love was the mural that we're doing on the side of a wall where local residents were coming by and asking how they can commit as well. And I think that is beautiful. And that is what we need to incorporate and do, because when the community itself feels that they're welcome, feel that they're part of it, they will take pride in that. And that's what we need in our city. We need some peace. You know, they will own it. They'll make sure that's their mural every time they ride their bike through it. And it's just a beautiful thing. So I want to commend that organization. And I try to find out the organizations online, but they're not listed. What you did list was the meeting itself. So I didn't want to go through the whole meeting to find an organization. So I would ask that you list the winners of those awards so that I can contact them directly. Okay, secondly, I didn't know the zoning commission was going to be here, but I have been attending the zoning meetings. And I'm a little concerned, I'll be quite honest. One of the ladies was a little bit rude and curt with me in an open forum, only because I asked the question of the gentleman that was speaking of where he was from. So I leave those meetings with not a clear understanding of what the zoning team is doing. And now I'm not new to, I don't know anything about zoning, but I went to every single one of them except one. And I still walked out of there with more questions. To this day, I still don't see the map of what the zoning commission or these people that we have contracted, these consultants, of where the zonings is going to be changed. I have not seen a map. They did put a map on a little presentation for maybe 15 seconds. And the person that was giving the presentation didn't even know where the streets were on the map. So as a long life resident of the city, I want to know exactly where they plan to build these, what they call them, joint use kind of buildings, where it's retail at the bottom and living on the top and cleaners at the bottom and some other things they sent. I want the community to know exactly what's going to happen in their community. I'm concerned for that little business owner who might get booted out because of a change in the zoning. So I'm kind of looking forward to seeing what she has to speak. I would suggest that you advise the consultants that they hear the community before they shut them up. Okay, thank you.
Do we have any other speakers today? Thank you. We'll move on to the consent calendar. This is the time for the commission to consider matters under consent calendar, items 1 and 2. Do I have a motion to consider items 1 and 2?
I motion.
I second.
Thank you, Vice Chair Hernandez, and then Commissioner Russell for the second.
I'm sorry, who motion?
Motion was Vice Chair.
Thank you.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Matter approved by unanimous consent. We have one presentation. Please note that there will be no motion or action taken on this item. For item number 3, Comprehensive Zoning Code Update Presentation.
Chair and Commissioners, we'd like to bring up Siri. She's been leading things on behalf of the Planning and Building Agency, and we're happy to have her here today. She's very qualified and experienced in talking about the zoning code update. Thank you, Siri.
Thank you very much. And thank you, commissioners and members of the community. I'm really appreciative of the opportunity to share with you a little bit about the city's comprehensive zoning code update. And just to clarify, some of you may have heard of the Transit Zoning Code update. Have you heard of that one? No? Okay, good. Then there's no confusion. Well, again, thank you for having me here tonight. We can go ahead and advance to the next slide. This is great. So first of all, I wanted to find out how many of you are familiar with zoning? Have you ever had to, yes, okay. Apply for a land use permit? Have you ever asked about what kind of business you could open up in a location? So we're all new to zoning. We'll then do a little primer so that you have some familiarity. Zoning is a process by which the city establishes zoning districts on a map of the entire city. We'll go to the next slide. Those districts are divided into these various categories, including different types of residential in the oranges and yellows and reds, different types of commercial in the pinks and purples, different types of industrial districts in the grays, and then there's a variety of others, including open space and institutional. So when someone comes in and asks what kind of business can I open up, or what kind of development can I pursue for the site, we look to this map and we identify what zone it's in, and then we go to a table on the next slide. And this is just for illustrative purposes. We haven't yet established a draft of these tables, but you would go to these tables to see, oh, I'm located in a particular district. And then there's a set of uses on the left-hand side of the table that you look at to determine what kind of uses you can have on a particular site. We'll go to the next slide. So a zoning code establishes different rules. Those rules include how a property can be used, as I just described. Those different categories include residential, retail, office, industrial, a mixture of compatible uses, and such as those that Gail had described, with residential up above, commercial on the main floor, government uses, parks and open space, and so forth. Secondly, the zoning code establishes rules for how property can be built and operated. Those kinds of standards include how tall a building can be, how many parking spaces are required, what the heights can be for fences and walls, what are the hours of operation, what are the different inside uses versus outside uses, and more. Then lastly, the zoning code establishes what kind of permits are required. Some permits can be approved by right, which is a staff level approval. Some require design review, which you might be interested in learning about. Some require what's called a conditional use permit, which requires the application go to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission looks it over to mainly look at the compatibility between that proposed use and the surrounding existing uses to make sure that they work well together. We issue variances through the zoning code. We do sign permits, and then we do shared parking plans. We'll go on to the next slide. So why have a zoning code? The reason is because good codes make for good communities. Compatibility is one really important thing. So you don't want industrial to be right next to residential. You don't want high density to be right next to low density residential. And so good codes create transitions between different types of uses and speaks to the quality of development in terms of the aesthetics and different aspects of the aesthetics. We'll go to the next slide. The zoning code update is an implementation measure of the general plan. The general plan establishes a vision for the city and how it will develop and change over time. When we went through the process to update the general plan, which was approved in 2022, we had 7 years of public engagement, and we talked about how we should be preserving some areas of the city and keeping them as much as they are as we can. And then in other areas, promoting development. This is necessary in part because we need more housing, we need a good, strong economy, so we need places where developers can redevelop or fill in vacant properties. Now, through the zoning code update, we are putting together the rules that will guide how those properties can be developed or redeveloped. And so we go back to the community to say, we have this vision for the general plan. Now, how do we want to achieve that vision through these rules? So in the last year and a half, we've gone through a series of interviews with a variety of stakeholders. We've held 12 workshops to date, and we've had a study session with the Planning Commission, and here's a few images of those activities. We'll go to the next slide. In terms of the overall process, we began in the winter of 2024 with our stakeholder workshops, our stakeholder interviews. We continued with community engagement through the spring and summer of 2024 when we held community workshops. Then in the fall, we had a workshop focused on the business, or 2 workshops focused on the business community. Then we began working on drafting of the language for the zoning code. We then went to the community with a second round of workshops to say, essentially, this is what we heard in the first round, and here are some of the ideas for how we can address your concerns. And then we requested feedback on how we were proposing to address those concerns. This summer, we'll have another study session with the Planning Commission. We'll go to the City Council with a study session. We'll finish drafting the zoning code, release it for public review, and then we'll have the 3rd round of workshops in September, most likely. And then we'll move on to public hearings with Planning Commission and City Council in the fall. You can go to the next slide. So this slide is the meat of the matter in terms of what we've heard from the community, what visions we established in the general plan, and the ideas for how we can address the concerns of the community. So these bolded blue figures illustrate the large sort of umbrella key themes. In the top left-hand corner, we have established in the general plan a vision for focus areas where we have key commercial corridors where we want to promote development, especially mixed-use development. We want that development to be walkable and bikeable. We want that to be a place where you can go day or night to experience a wide variety of different things. We also have heard that open space and quality of housing is very important. We've heard a lot of concern about parking issues. And then in the bottom right-hand corner, we've heard a lot about concerns related to the relationship between residential and industrial uses. Based on historic development patterns before zoning was really a real industry or real policy kind of document, we had residential established next to industrial because people wanted to live close to their jobs. Now we have a zoning code and we can update that so that we can rectify those incompatibilities. So going into more detail, in terms of creating vibrant, walkable commercial areas, we're proposing a few different things. First, we're proposing the creation of these new commercial districts that were established through the general plan and that would be implemented through the zoning code. And those would be an areas where we would have a mixture of businesses and a mixture of uses for that kind of 24-hour experience. In addition, we're proposing to broaden the list of uses to include neighborhood serving, such as community centers and health clinics. This was an important piece that we heard during the stakeholder workshops. Close to residential, we want to see things that will support a healthy, whole lifestyle. And then thirdly, we are proposing to permit developers some more flexibility to incorporate the kinds of commercial uses that the market demands so that they can fill their tenant spaces instead of leaving them vacant. In terms of open space and housing, developers have asked that we create flexible open space standards so that they can provide open space in a way that fits with their site plan. We heard from the public that they want more publicly accessible open spaces, and through the zoning code, we can't create new public parks. However, we can require that open spaces incorporated into private projects be made publicly accessible. And so there are some ways that we can facilitate that option for privately accessible open spaces in apartment complexes and commercial types of projects. And then lastly, in terms of open space and housing, we hear that we want high quality housing. We want a wide variety of types of housing. And we hear that the transition between higher density, tall buildings and lower intensity residential neighborhoods should be transitioned between those two. In terms of parking, we hear that residential neighborhoods have a big problem with parking. And so we are talking about ways that we can increase the amount of space available for off-street parking on private property, so that frees up the spaces on the street. We also have heard that our parking requirements for apartments and other types of multifamily are too high. And that makes it really difficult for developers to produce housing, especially affordable housing. And so we're looking at the industry, we're looking at surrounding communities so that we can be proposing parking standards that are consistent with those that are approved for this type of development and as are regulated by other jurisdictions near us. And then lastly, we have two strict, not strict, but we have parking requirements for shopping centers that are based on the cumulative of all uses. So when a new business wants to come in, we look at all of the parking and we say that intensity of use will push up the parking requirements so that new tenant space or that existing tenant space is difficult to fill. I know I didn't explain that very well, but the bottom line is that our parking requirements are making it difficult for property owners to tenant all of their spaces. So we're talking about ways to make that parking more flexible. And lastly, in terms of residential and industrial uses, we're proposing a new zoning district that would create a buffer between residential neighborhoods and industrial areas. So this new business park district would allow for jobs-rich types of uses while minimizing any impacts to the residential neighborhoods. Secondly, we've heard a lot of promotion of clean industry and new jobs to support our economy. And so we're talking about ways to retain our current industrial areas as well as having these new flexible districts that promote that clean industry. And then lastly, we've heard from the property owners and industrial business owners that they need to retain a place to continue to operate where they are separated from the residential. And so we're talking about maintaining much of our existing industrial for those businesses. So that concludes my presentation. This gives you a big picture of some of these topics that we are trying to address through the zoning code. I'm happy to speak with any members of the community. I have maps available to look at from the general plan. And we are working on developing the maps that establish these new zoning districts that will be made available to the community this summer for feedback. My contact information was on the very last slide, and I can be found through the staff as well if you need to reach me. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
I have a question. The Logan neighborhood, which is near the transit center, I imagine is an area that is being rezoned possibly. And I'm curious, what about artists who need industrial, or what about preserving spaces for artists who have worked in Logan for years, so that they can both be artists who need industrial zoning, but it's also a neighborhood and they might want to live and work in their space, in a space like that. I'm thinking of a number of artists in that particular neighborhood. And I'd like to know that that will continue.
That's a wonderful question. And the reason why I asked at the beginning if you were familiar with the transit zoning code is because the neighborhood you're speaking of is located in the transit zoning code. And we've gone through over a year-long process to look at some of the regulations for that area. The simple answer to your question is that yes, the live work type of units and the low intensity type of industrial will be retained in those areas. So it's the noxious uses where we have concerns that will be buffered both in those areas and throughout the city as a whole. In addition, we have 2 new zoning districts called the Flex that are proposed. And in those Flex areas, creative maker spaces are one of the key things that we'd like to be promoting.
So you said mentioned like noxious, so like, let's say welding. Would welding fall under what is allowed or will be allowed in the future?
I'd be happy to get into details with you in a follow-up conversation, but welding is an activity that would take place within a particular business. So I would say we need to look at what that business is. So like if it's metalworks, for example, we'd need to look at the list of permitted uses. And I don't have that list in front of me, so I'd have to follow up with you to answer that question.
I'm curious about that. And also stone masonry, I guess, would be the other.
And in the transit zoning code update, the list of permitted uses was refined. And those makers spaces, types of uses that include crafts, artisan crafts are one of the permitted uses within the transit zoning code area. So you said metalworks and stone?
Yes, I know an artist who moved to that neighborhood specifically because she was a welding metal artist and that allowed her to work there and there were not many other places. We also had a lot of artists who were welding, glass blowing, things like that in the Logan Creative, which I know is no longer a space for artists, but I was very attractive because of the ability to have that kind of industrial and residential mix. And then I also know there is a very historic business there that does stone work, I believe, and I just would like to know that they would have some protection, being how important they've been to the arts. I mean, they built the fountain in the middle of the arts village. So.
And that's great feedback, and it's perfect timing for that kind of feedback because we're in the process of creating that updated zoning map and putting together the revised set of permitted uses. So any kind of uses that you think would be great to see in the city, we'd love to hear about them and consider folding them into the list of permitted uses.
So Siri, how would we gather some of these comments if later our commissioners go back and talk to their constituents and all that? How would we communicate those feedback with you?
Emailing me directly is great, and then I share it with the project team. In addition, we will have further meetings with the Planning Commission, like I said, at the study session, so you can encourage constituents to come out and express their voice. And then, like I said earlier, we'll be going to Planning Commission for public hearing and to City Council for public hearing. So there are a lot of opportunities to express ideas and to incorporate those ideas into the draft code.
Could you please send us either the deck or something that has that deadline so that I'll forward it to the commissioners and they'll know when the next thing's coming up to remind folks to come out.
Yes, I'll make sure you have the presentation.
Thank you.
I had a question, or a couple. What's the requirement for parking per apartment unit?
So the current requirement we give the example in one of our presentations for a 3-bedroom apartment. So under the current code, I won't break it down for you into the details, but I believe it's roughly 5 parking spaces for a 3-bedroom unit.
For a 3-bedroom?
For a 3-bedroom unit. Which is very high compared to industry standard. And that's part of what makes it very difficult for developers to provide housing, especially, like I said, affordable housing, given the cost of parking. And so we're proposing to reduce that number. I don't have a proposed number to give you right now. That's something that we're considering. And we'll be coming back to the Planning Commission and to the community with that number in the future.
Yeah, because I understand, and my work in housing, that is an obstacle to getting, things built and, or even, for businesses as you laid out. And is like zoning, having the parking where the elevator parking where, like you stack cars on top of each other, is that also something that like you zone for that within apartments, or is that just something that the developer like incorporates or doesn't into their
That's something that we can enable as a standalone use. And in terms of existing apartments, I'd have to look to other staff to let me know if we have any restrictions against that. But I don't believe we have any restrictions against stacked parking where you pull in and you have the elevator to stack one parking space on top of the other. Okay. Okay, and I can do some more research for you to find that out. But that's a recommendation that we can consider for a broader area.
Yeah, I've seen it in some apartments in Santana, and I was curious what that process is. So definitely allowing for that, and maybe even encouraging that could help to ease the apartment situation. But parking and homelessness are the two issues that constantly are at the top of community members' lists of complaints or concerns. And we can't solve either one of them very easily. There's no silver bullet. So I understand it's not an easy
Vice
challenge.
Chair, Via del Sol Apartments off of
That one.
Fairview, they have them, and then down at
That's where I seen it.
Stevens, which is an apartment complex right where Bristol and Sunflower nearby, just east of Bristol, they also have some of those, and they've helped alleviate parking issues there. And I don't know the specific zones, but when I talk to housing developers, I talk about those type of options. So.
Absolutely. And you mentioned offsite, being able to have, because, as apartments, become like, saturated with parking, then those folks want to come to the residential areas to park, but then those residential, then, have permitted parking. And so they're, like having school sites be allowed to be parking sites overnight and things like that. I know are things that folks have considered in the past, but, and then the last thing is, zoning and environmental justice. So is when you're looking at rezoning areas that previously were industrial sites, like how much of like just the ability to clean for items like lead and other that we've found and myself through my work with Orange County Environmental Justice Group, we found a lot high quantities of this. So yeah, so what is the process for determining whether or not an area is rezonable even for housing? That was, yeah.
So I'd like to back up just a little bit and make note that for zoning, those tools are forward-looking. So any problems that existed in the past in terms of environmental health issues are things that we can't directly resolve through the zoning code, except for, as you'd phrased the question, rezoning something that was industrial to residential and how we would address that. And I can answer simply, we're not looking at any areas that have been industrial to become residential. If we were to do that in the future, then there are a variety of ways that we assess the sites to determine whether or not they're appropriate for residential.
Thank you.
I have a question. Earlier, you mentioned that you have meetings with stakeholders. So what are their interests? And also, what makes an ideal partnership?
It's a very good question. It's a very good question, and you kind of, and I kind of lost it immediately. So I think the first question, if I heard correctly or remember correctly, was about their interests. And the four main topics that I showed on that last screen really represent the main things that we're hearing from stakeholders, both developers, business owners, and most importantly, our residential constituents. So they're really concerned about open space and having places that are green and sustainable that they can go to. They're really interested in parking and very interested in the residential industrial interface. Those are the top issues that are coming up in our current set of workshops. And then the other thing I would note is that during the general plan update, there were stakeholders that were involved in identifying what are called focus areas, which are these commercial corridors and districts that are most appropriate for high density uses, high intensity and high density uses. And those were all vetted through the public process and adopted into the general plan. Those are being implemented through the zoning code. And we're hearing a kind of a mixture of responses where some stakeholders are really excited by the idea of mixed use areas where you can go walk and bike, have access to transit, live close to neighborhood serving commercial. And then other people aren't as excited about seeing that. But the
How come?
How come? I can't speak to that.
They don't mention anything?
Well, I guess yeah. I can speak to the fact that they are critical of the idea of that high intensity type of use. I can't explain why, because there isn't a whole lot of explanation behind the why, with the exception of needing to protect and preserve existing single-family residential areas. And so the proposal is to create transitional spaces where you step up from the lowest scale buildings to medium scale buildings to high scale buildings. I had another point that I was going to make about that, but I did lose it. Because it was your second question. And your second question, would you remind me what it was?
What makes an ideal partnership?
Makes an ideal partnership in the context of a zoning code update?
Correct.
In the
Just in
context of
general,
zoning-
like overall, like you said, there was multiple stakeholders. So it's like, what makes an ideal partnership overall?
An ideal partnership is one where all parties feel comfortable expressing their opinions and doing your best to respond to those concerns of constituents.
No, I love the fact how you showed examples on how you're bridging community all like alongside, and that's great. So thank you for that. But I just wanted to, so thank you for answering that.
I also appreciated the multiple periods, ways, and time frames that you're engaging with stakeholders and community as well. But given my experience looking at one particular development in a different city, where they were trying to pass this large-scale multi-acre development, and there was a single community workshop that only had 16 people in attendance. What I really want to hear is, on average at these community workshops, how many people are attending and about how many in total are you engaging?
This is a very, for a zoning code person, for a planner, this is tricky because I want to see a lot of people. And I think it's very interesting, but I'm not your average person. And so when people are prioritizing how they spend their time, they don't choose to come to a zoning code meeting. So in terms of numbers that we've seen during our first round of workshops, well, I should back up and say, in terms of outreach and letting people know about the workshops, we far exceed over 100,000 touch points saying, come and join us at these workshops. In terms of the first round, we had over 140. And at this last round, we had less than 100. And it's a challenge. It's consistent across all jurisdictions, getting people interested in something like the technicalities of zoning. People just don't have an awareness of the impact that zoning can have on their built environment. And so it's important when we hear things like parking is a major issue, and we hear that affirmed through different touch points or different interactions, then we know parking is something we need to consider. The same is true of open space. And so those are things that people can really attach to. And so we're contemplating ways for the third round of workshops to reframe our messaging to make sure that those topics that are of most importance to community members are very visible in the marketing materials.
And then has there been any thought or plan within your team to expand the way to do outreach and to get this input from communities outside of just workshops, which community members may not be able to attend because of time constraints or transportation? Are there surveys or other like asynchronous ways that they can submit that input directly to your team?
After the first round of workshops, we had a visual workshop. A virtual workshop. So they saw all the same materials and they could provide input in that way. Beyond that, we make ourselves available for meetings at any point to our stakeholders. We don't have people take us up on that offer very often. There are a few of the environmental justice organizations that do. So we continue to work through the CBOs to kind of say, how are people reacting? What do you think we can do to expand outreach? And so we talk about different options, but there are very few options that are workable for a zoning code where you have this wide range of technical topics. If you have any ideas, I'm happy to take them in.
I hear you. This sounds incredibly technical and difficult, and I think you're doing a great job at, even in your presentation today, making it digestible in a way that I felt like I understood the gist of what you're presenting. Similar to you, I just lost a thought, but I know that Commissioner Russell has a question, so I'll pass it over to her for now.
So this might be a little bit outside your purview, but I'm curious, as you have conversations about new developments, if there is conversation or if there's an opportunity for input to press upon the importance of including funding for arts. I know, like in the past, I'll use the CVS as an example. A new CVS was built and there was some portion of funding that was designated for a sculpture or for some kind of art, and they ended up putting a metal sculpture there, which was damaged and has been removed. And so now we have no art on that corner anymore. But I'm just curious if this is part of these conversations, if this is something, if this is the right forum for that, or if there's a better place, maybe the Planning Commission, to raise such an issue.
I really appreciate that comment. The funding for arts is definitely beyond the purview of the zoning code and the Planning Commission for that matter. Having said that, we can include requirements for certain types of development to incorporate art into their site plan and into their structures. And so I'm happy to take in any feedback you have about what kinds of projects those should be. Clearly, every size project should have, or different sizes of projects should have different types of requirements. So for a 10-unit project, we wouldn't want to have the same type of requirement as you would have a 100-unit project.
Since I have your attention,
Yes.
can I also add that I hope that in those conversations or when the opportunity arises, that we create allocations so that the art is not sourced from, like, I don't know, a catalog of just available art, as what I believe happened with the CVS example. I think we have a much better example. I want to say, help me out here, Flower and in the South Coast Metro area, and there is a metal sculpture there that is of the celery. Do you remember this?
Yeah, Flower and Sunflower.
There we go.
Or no, I'm sorry, it's MacArthur.
MacArthur, yes, that's right. Not a great location, in my opinion, because it's not a very walkable area. And so most people don't know it's even there. But it is a way to honor the history of celery workers, I believe, in that area, and just local history. And I just would love for there to be a better correspondence between our local artists and history and new developments.
I appreciate that, and we'll carefully consider how we might word a regulation that says original and prioritizes local art. I'm off the top of my head, I can't think of a way for us to regulate that, but I'll take that back to the team and see what we can come up with.
So for the public, it's at the northeast corner of Flower and Sunflower at the end of the bike trail. And the art piece is entitled "We Too Were Once Strangers." And it's an homage to the Sakioka family and the Delhi, they're Delhi workers, and that's a Delhi wash. And Ron Ono, Ron, 51-year employee with the city, landscape architect with the city, worked on that project from 2005 until about 2010 when all that work was done. And I was happy that he did some art there. I did not like the celery, but
The historical significance of it is very important. And you don't, like in the CVS example, you did not see that. It was an interesting sculpture, but it just had no story to tell. And I just think if we're going to invest in art, we should make sure that it tells stories about who we are and who we want to be and where we've come from.
My question came back. So what languages are you engaging people in the touch points that you said? What languages did those get sent out in?
English, Spanish, Vietnamese, and Khmer.
And then the last point I want to make is less of a question and more of a comment. Like I said, I definitely hear you. This is technical and it's difficult to engage people, but I really strongly believe that more people need to be interested in things like zoning for them to really understand what it means to be civically engaged and engaged in the decision making that's happening in their cities. So this is not a directive or anything, but I really encourage you all to continue to try to find ways to bridge this technical information to our communities so that our community members can really be involved with the development of their city.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah. I'll add to that. They say if you build it, they will come. And when it comes to meetings, that's not the case. Like there's a lot that can and should be done by like nonprofits or by the city staff to be able to encourage, promote, and almost like take folks by the hand to attend these kinds of meetings. So is the next meeting is on what day or like the next round of
The next
community
round of
input?
workshops will be in the fall,
Fall.
so
Not sure
likely
yet.
September.
Okay, there's no set dates yet.
No set dates yet.
And is there a way for folks to like maybe watch things through Zoom or give feedback in ways if that they can attend the in person?
Yes, and well, for the workshops, the way that they're designed to be very interactive, it's difficult to have a Zoom option for people. So no, not for the meetings themselves. However, we post everything to our website and we include all of the workshop materials, both what's presented as well as the worksheets, so that people can continue to submit their input past the workshop dates. And I have a list of interested parties that will receive an email with links to that, as well as the summary of what we heard during the second round of workshops. So they can see the kind of input that we've received and they can continue to give input through the worksheets.
Yeah, and I'm personally committing to, reaching out to folks, in the nonprofit sector to make sure that these are attended, because it's very important, as you mentioned, very, very important. And people wonder years down the line, like, hey, why is this happening? It's like, well, it happened, all these years ago. Case in point, the streetcar, like the decisions get made, and folks don't give the input when it actually mattered, and then later on, like complain because they weren't listened to, but they didn't lift up their voice, and collectively as a group. So, but thank you for the things, the work that you're doing, and hopefully that the comments here can help to to include some of many of us working in the community, can definitely are bringing these kinds of thoughts that we've heard previously about what our communities need.
I appreciate that. And I appreciate all the input. I appreciate the comments from Gail as well. And I look forward to seeing you involved, if not actually see some workshops or worksheets submitted to you from you as well. Thank you again.
And so quickly for members of the public and for our commission, Siri Champion's cell phone, or I'm sorry, office number, her email are all online when you type in zoning code update. It has the presentation. It's got a recording from previous work study sessions. It's got a lot of links and a great resource to get your opinions and thoughts in. So thank you, Siri.
Thank you.
All right, really enjoyed that round of questions and discussion from our commission here. We'll now consider matters under the business calendar. The first item on the business calendar is item number 4, approval of Sahuayo Sister City mural ranking list and selection of artists. Will staff report on the matter?
Thank you, Chair Vu. I'm just going to read straight from the staff report in case there are those in the public who didn't have a chance to read it. And the recommended action is that the commission approves the ranking list for Sahuayo Sister City Mural Project and recommend that the city manager execute agreements with 2 artists. And so to bring up the presentation from last time, just to remind everybody of what was presented last time and what were some of the results. So the overview was back in November of last year. We released RFQ. The budget was $45,500 for the south-facing exterior of Garage B on Fifth and Spurgeon. So the garage itself is owned by the city, and we were anticipating to install it in spring of 2025, and that has passed already. So next slide. Those were the applicants with the scores, the final scores. We had said that we would select up to 2 artists to work with 2 artists from Saguayo or from Mexico, and that is all the rankings. Next slide, please. Just that the one that ranked the highest is Brian Peterson Art Inc. And the next slide, please. And some examples of his artwork in the city of Santa Ana. And the second highest ranking applicant is Up to Speed Murals, headed by Damon Lujan. And the next slides will show examples of his work in the city. And the following are 2 muralists who were selected by our Saguayo partners, the Saguayo government. The first one being Alejandro Navarrete Gonzalez, and the second one is Miguel Angel Sanchez Amezcua. Those were the tentative timelines, but obviously it's being pushed. And so that's it in a nutshell, just to remind everybody again. So any discussions you'd like to have regarding the rankings, if you wanted to speak to changing anything?
I want to start with a comment that was shared with me just a few days ago when I mentioned that this vote was happening. And somebody said, does Santa Ana not have the talent here locally? And I just want to address that comment publicly, because I want to affirm that I do believe that we have the local talent here. I believe that we have artists who have done incredible, not only artwork, but have also demonstrated a really strong ability to collaborate with other artists and incorporate a lot of different ideas. And I also believe that the more we invest in our local artists, the better the art we will have available to us can become. And I say that because this is such a historic opportunity. I believe it's the largest investment we've ever made in a single art project in our city's history. I could be corrected on that, but I believe that is the case. Also, obviously, the very first international collaboration, and just a historic opportunity for us to tell a story about our city, about the people who have decided to come here, their immigrant journeys and stories and struggles and their dreams, and even today, especially their fears. And I just believe it's so important that we prioritize the people who do live here in Santa Ana, who have chosen this place against odds often. And I don't think we did that in this instance. I think the process was flawed. I think that I hope that we can use this as a learning opportunity and do better by our local artists in the future. And if any of you are listening who are local artists and feel that way, I just want you to know that we really do believe that you should be prioritized when it comes to how we invest in arts using city funds.
Um, yeah, I appreciate the sentiments from my colleague. Um, and yeah, I completely agree that we should prioritize and uplift our local artists. You know, we have, you know, just many amazing folks here, you know, that have been, you know, nationally recognized and locally recognized, and even folks that haven't, you know, because they're just starting out. And there's only so much funds that this body, you know, or even the council, you know, directs towards art. We should increase that. And I think that's what we've done, and I've done, you know, advocating for that with, you know, my council member that appointed me, I mean, Council Member Vasquez and others on the council, that we need more funding opportunities for artists and to be able to set up a process. And I think we might be talking about that a little more in the next item, but to make sure that, yeah, we specifically have some requirements that say, you know, that we want to support Santana residents that are, you know, that are artists. And I do not regret my vote. I think, and based on the percentages of how it all played out, there was, you know, 4 of us. So, you know, it kind of seemed that there was a consensus here, at least a majority consensus, if not a full, as far as like which were the applications that were the best, you know, submitted, and the quality of the work. And beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and so it is with art. You know, some folks like a certain style, some, you know, others doesn't appease them. But in this particular sense, like if we wanted, and for future, you know, I think there was flaws, but in the future we can be more specific to perhaps give up extra points to build some sort of equity for people that live in Santana, so that, you know, they can hope, you know, yeah, place higher in the overall kind of, so that we can ensure that happens. But again, in the conversations ongoing with like the funds that, you know, we'll hopefully get from the city council, and the city manager has, you know, has suggested that, you know, he would like to continue the event sponsorships and the art grants. Let's make sure that, you know, a percentage of those are specifically exclusively for Santa Ana residents, so that we can, you know, make sure that, you know, as we are continuing to fund art projects, like we're not leaving our community behind, while at the same time, you know, wanting to bring together and put together the best art pieces and art projects together, with, you know, our partners, and in particular with the Sahuayo group. So I'm looking forward to what, you know, this project, you know, and what will come from the folks from Mexico and the folks here. And I think that we're going to have something that we're really going to be proud of at the end of the day. So those are my comments. Thank you.
On this particular item, I want to make sure that we also respect the time and effort that folks from Sahuayo have put into this. I know that they are ready to go, and they've been ready to go for multiple months. And in honoring this sister city relationship, I believe that it is in our best interest the best way we can honor that is to move forward with the applicants that's ranked very clearly quite high. If you look at the actual scores across all of the 5 of us who rated these applications at the time, every single one of us rated both of the 2 top scorers very quite high. And I think that speaks to the quality of the art that we saw and the quality of the applications that we saw. And I hear that there is interest in ensuring that our RFP process is one that is equitable as much as possible. And one thing I want to propose is, are the commissioners here interested in creating an ad hoc commission to refine the RFP process to make it one that is more equitable?
To clarify, you're talking about future RFPs, right? Not for the Sahuayo one.
Yes, that's correct. Moving forward, to create a new RFP for future projects that we'll consider moving forward.
I'm supportive of it. I think, it would make all the sense for Commissioner Russell to serve on that board if she has some time. I know, you have a lot of responsibilities, but I'm personally, I don't have the time right now, but I'm happy to give input as far as what equity in this process, could look like, and share that with the group. So.
Yes, I'm interested in the idea. I just think that we haven't, I think we're still on this topic and I just want to stay focused on this. I think that that's a future endeavor. I know that Parks and Rec is also, Parks and Rec has a lot of art, very historic art that was recently, as under a year ago, I think in jeopardy of being possibly damaged or even destroyed without the intervention of local artists who knew the history, knew the importance of that artwork, and rallied in its defense, and as a result are now embarking on the development of, I believe, a framework. Susie Lopez Guerra and I met with an artist who is working on that to really explore something that's really I'm very passionate about, which is not just, and it relates to this, which is not just how we go about qualifying artists and exploring the application process, but also how we ensure that the art that we invest in as a city is art that engages our community. And actually, now that I think about it, it's very related to our conversation earlier that how important it is when we make zoning decisions, for instance, we have people there and we in all the different languages and we do all kinds of outreach above and beyond what we might normally do. And I think that is definitely the art we invest in this city should definitely follow a very similar expectation. And I think I've said this many times, but I think that's what also distinguishes art, the art that it happens here in Santa Ana from other cities. Tram, we had a conversation about my favorite places to see art. And, I see art in everywhere I go. Anytime on a business trip, I go see art. I go to museums. I go to visit artists and see artwork and go to their workshops and see them in their art making spaces. But the art that happens here in Santa Ana has a collaborative, really involving the participants and non-artists in a way that I've never experienced before. And I just think it's something that makes Santa Ana so unique. And I want to see that built into the infrastructure of future RFPs and RFQs.
Are there any further discussion or questions regarding this matter? Do we have oh, go ahead.
Can you clarify exactly there are two artists and the expectation is that we vote now on two artists, or that's the only option? Okay.
Yes. Yes.
I motion to approve.
Do I have a second to approve item number 4, approval of the Ohio Sister City mural ranking list and selection of artists?
I approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Ochoa, for the second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Oppose.
And given that there are 4 of us here today, do we need 4 to make quorum for the consent?
Yeah, right, yeah.
So if we are unable to reach that decision, would this discussion then come back for a following?
Both in order for it to.
Yeah, would this item come back a following month or?
Is that what happens? We vote again next month. Mhm. Mhm.
Okay. Do I need to make a motion to bring it back the following month?
That would be appropriate.
Okay. Do we have a motion to bring this item back for the July meeting?
Yeah, I motion to bring it back. What?
Motion as well.
Thank you, Vice Chair Hernandez for the motion and Commissioner Ochoa for the second. We'll be bringing this matter back for further discussion at the July meeting. All right, the second item on the business calendar is item number 5, approval of the mural restoration ranking list. Will staff report on this matter?
Okay, so this has also been in the works, even though it's a new topic for the commissioners this time. It's Restore Art Mural Restoration Conservation Pilot Program. It's our pilot program to, as Commissioner Russell was alluding to, is how do we preserve in a systematic way all the arts in the city. So the recommended action for this item is that the commission approves the ranking list for the Restore Art Mural Restoration Conservation Pilot Program. We'll have a presentation here. Next slide, please. The pilot programs generally is giving direct funding to muralists for the conservation of murals within our city, restore and conserve. Opportunity, and it also additionally wants to give an opportunity to emerging artists through paid apprenticeships. So as we have all talked about numerous times, is how do we build more artists in their capacity and building their craft rather than just artists are left on their own. So here's a chance to mentor for these more seasoned artists and muralists to mentor up and coming or emerging artists in this craft of conservation and restoration. This was a component that we're piloting this time, so it is not mandatory for them to receive this funding, but it was highly encouraged and they were given extra points if they did. It is also to enhance the visual landscape in parts of the city that don't get a lot of attention like that. Next slide, please. The main criteria are that the mural has to be located within the city of Santa Ana, that it has to be visible from the public right-of-way, it has to have a strong historical and cultural connection to the neighborhood, and that it reflects themes that address both historical significance and contemporary issues. Next slide, please. The total budget for this program was $90,000. And the funding was determined by the panel based on the condition of the mural, the size of the mural, location, and the specific needs of that mural, specific needs of that restoration. Next slide, please. The review panel was an outside panel composed of arts and history professionals, public art conservation professionals, muralists, and an arts and culture commissioner. No staff was part of the panel. No city staff. This is the final list and rankings along with the recommended funding by the panel. As you can see, they recommended funding for 5 applicants. There were 9 total. And applicants scoring 80 or above were recommended for funding. You also further notice that several applicants show up multiple times. We offered that they could apply up to 3 murals, since many artists did multiple murals or they're interested in restoring multiple murals. So they were allowed to apply for up to 3 murals separately, and therefore they were ranked for each mural separately. So not all of them got all the murals that they applied for. Next slide, please. The following 5 are the applicants that were recommended for funding. The first one scoring is artists Alicia Rojas and Roger Reyes. The location is the alley in 4th Street, located at 108 East 4th Street, with a score of 98.5, and the funding is $20,000. We've shown the original mural as well as the current condition of how it's been defaced and vandalized. Next slide, please. The next applicant is also Alicia Rojas and Roger Reyes. The location is Friendship Park. The score is 89.25, and the funding is $8,000. Similarly, there's the original mural on the right and the current condition on the left. Next slide, please. The artist is Roberto Del Hoyo. The location is Salvador Park. The score is 84.75. Funding is $12,045. The original mural is on the top, and the main issues with this mural is that it's peeling off of the stucco wall. So, and also some restoration, because there was some tagging that Parks and Rec had to paint over, so the artist would restore the entire mural. Next slide, please. This next artist is Marina Aguilera, Tai Nguyen, and Andrea Pinedo. It's a team. The location is El Salvador Park near Artesia Pilar. The score is 84.25, and the funding is $24,955. The original mural on the left has been completely covered up. It's a handball inside of the park, located inside the park. So she wants to recreate this mural again on that handball court, handball wall, yes. She is the original artist of that mural, yes. Okay, next slide, please. I think this is the final artist that was recommended, Moises Camacho. Location is the Santa Ana Urban Technology Center. And the score is 80.25, and the funding is $25,000. The original mural is on the left, and the current condition is on the right. There's just various like fading and pockets of painting over, tagging, and that sort of thing. So that's it for the murals that were given funding. Any questions or comments or discussion?
I do. To address Vice Chair Hernandez's comment, were all of these artists the original artists of the murals?
Not all the artists. For example, I think I'm sorry, I think the Friendship Park. Oh my gosh, yes, please, sorry.
And
That's the only one I think is not necessarily.
And if not, what were the precautions taken to engage or contact the original artists if they were still alive or their next of kin?
Yes. So that one's the original. The other one, Moises was the original artist.
This one, yeah.
Roberto's the original artist.
Okay.
That's the original artist, yes. Alicia and Roger. Next one. That one, Alicia did not, and Roger did not paint, I believe. But I believe it was a community mural. So it was, just different folks from the community painting anyway. And I believe she got permission from the neighborhood to restore that.
And I think actually, just to correct the record, I believe in this case and also in the alley, although there are individual artists named there, I believe the artwork itself, I can attest to, was part of the Santa Ana Art Coalition.
Yes.
Community Coalition. So I just want to make sure that that credit is given to that organization because they've been working on murals for almost 20 years, I think.
Yes. Yes. Any other questions or comments or?
Can I just say one? This is just a personal touch that one of my children is featured in one of those murals. So that is very
Yes.
beautiful.
Hearing no further discussion, do we have a motion to approve item number 5, approval of mural restoration ranking list?
Wait, I have one more question. Sorry. What is are there any expectations or requirements about protective covering?
Yes, that's definitely part of the requirement is that they must paint, coat it with an anti-graffiti coating.
Okay.
For sure. That's part of everything from now on.
Do we have a motion?
I move.
Thank you, Commissioner Russell. Do we have a second?
I second.
Thank you, Vice Chair Hernandez. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Matter is approved by unanimous consent. All right, now finally, we move into the work study session. We have one item under work study session. Please note that there will be no motion or action taken under this item. The item under work study session is the preliminary discussion of funding priorities for the fiscal year 2025 to 2026. And this is a preliminary discussion because we do not have yet a fully confirmed budget that is actually made it to our commission just yet. And so because we don't have those numbers, we cannot confirm or propose any particular projects at this time. But in order to focus our discussion today, I'm going to ask that commissioners speak no more than twice just to get our thoughts out, make sure that we're communicating, coordinating with one another, and then we'll come back next month with a more full discussion for how we want to begin to prioritize the budget that we'll be getting for this commission. So with that, Is there anyone who would like to begin their thoughts on the funding priorities for this upcoming fiscal year?
I think, yeah, as I stated earlier, we don't know how much funds we're going to get. I have a question though before I get started. So there's artist grants, right? There's a set amount of funds that has been given by the council, every year for us to fund these things. Is that correct? And what's the amount?
For the artist grants, it's $100,000.
Okay. And so is that amount up for debate right now in the current budgeting? Or, to continue, or is that a line item that's just automatically funded?
That's a line for now, yes.
So then the conversation is that it is being had is around increasing the amount and potentially continuing what we've called event sponsorships. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yes, we're asking for more funding for other arts and culture.
Other arts and culture.
Other
Okay.
arts and culture.
Yeah. Okay, got it. Yeah. So I feel very strongly that aside from the artist grants, that we should prioritize event sponsorships. Had conversations with Tram and other folks about, the pros and cons of this, for my colleagues that are new, or a commissioner that will join us next month. And, like when we had these discussions and around funding, it was always about wanting to spread the money to fund as many people as possible. And we were able to do that. And not only that, we were able to be successful in sponsoring events or individuals that had never received a dime from the city, because they just didn't know about the artist grants, didn't apply to them, or their applications weren't good, and so it kind of goes back to the earlier conversation about, the reality is, the process is set up to have winners and losers. But in the process, and there's definitely, as I mentioned earlier, the need for some sort of perhaps reform or tweaking of the grant process so that we are to make it more equitable by giving extra points or added points or whatever to folks that live in Santana. I think that's important. But as far as the event sponsorship, or as far as additional funds on top of the 100, if we were to get 200, presumably, hopefully, like I think, like probably at least half, 50,000 should absolutely go to event sponsorships. And again, the difference for the community to know, the difference between grants and the sponsorships is a grant, you have to, apply for it, but also you have to keep receipts. There's a whole, reporting aspect of it that is required for grants. Event sponsorships, that's not the case. It's literally a donation, to that, and they're, of course, giving us the breakdown of what they would want, how much money they want and what they would spend that much money on. And we are, trusting that they're promoting this in good faith and that they are actually using this for the things that they're saying. But, that's kind of just, we're trusting that, but we can't enforce that in the ways that grants do. And so, I feel very comfortable that the sponsorships are part of that approach that the commission can take to make this process more equitable, to make funding more equitable, to allow for more people. I believe we had like 40 people that received funding from the last one, or over 40, if I'm not mistaken. How many people get the grants from the 100,000? A handful? Less than 10?
Oh, no, from the other ones, well, last few times we've had 20-something.
20-something. Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So half. So anyways, all to say that if we were to, have at least 50,000 be towards event sponsorships for events that happen in our city. That'd be something that one of my priorities. And lastly, perhaps, part of those 50,000 could be specifically and only for artists that live in Santana, live and work. So, but I'm open to hearing from my colleagues as far as like what that looks like. But in just kind of mulling it over, I definitely want event sponsorship, and if we are to increase the artist grants, then perhaps part of that money is specifically for Santa Ana residents. Thank you.
I also want to agree with Vice Chair Hernandez. I think the sponsorships are a really great way to enter into like publicly funded art through this city. And from what I've seen, and even looking at it from like the back end, when we look at the applications for sponsorships versus grants, the way we look at them is different. And I generally believe that the stakes are higher with the grants. The process is more onerous, and it's a process that is inaccessible to a great many people who don't have that experience in writing grant applications in that way, which is in itself kind of its own art, though very technical art. And I'm interested in expanding sponsorships. Yes, have event sponsorships especially, because I understand that these events, these experiential moments, these ways of interacting with art are so very, they bring together our community in a way that just participating or just like looking or viewing at art doesn't do. And so I want to preserve that, but I also want to see if we can expand sponsorships into projects, projects that reflect what our city needs, projects that reflect what our city wants. And given the climate of things, given how we, are the only sanctuary city in this county, I'm thinking about how can we create project sponsorships that really uplift the contributions of immigrants or provide know your rights information through project sponsorships. And so those are some of the ideas that I'm thinking about. But I do want to make that a sponsorship more so than a grant, just so that it remains something that is accessible to all kinds of artists within our city.
I'm so glad we're talking about equity and the importance of doing so. I went back and looked at some of the event sponsorships that we have funded in the past. And I did see a lot of inequities, actually, that and things that bothered me. I saw that we had very small neighborhood organizations that we funded, like a chalk festival, which I love the idea of that. I remember they even asked lower. I think we funded them more than they asked for because it was such a beautiful community-oriented idea. But we also had some very large organizations like the Bowers and Discovery Cube, who clearly have ample resources for the grant writing and the preparation and just the ability to submit, whether it's a grant or event sponsorship, that is not equitable in those cases. And so I hope if we pursue event sponsorships in this way, that we try to make allowances so that we are not putting, a neighborhood organization against, one of the applications, it was submitted by like a VP of, arts engagement or something like that. And I just don't see that as very fair. I'm also really concerned that events require things like tables and chairs and decorations. And I looked at one application that we funded that we funded that. We funded balloon displays, and I think those are great. But I don't want to see my city invest our very, very small, minuscule arts budget in that. I'd like to see it engage in those, in artists development or the artists to serve in roles at events or to have, arts workshops or engagement of some kind. I think those things, if we had more money, sure, but we don't. And I just think there are other places for people to fund those things. I want to see arts engagement and not decoration funded. With event sponsorships. Again, just, we, in the case of the Bowers, I just want to point out that we fund them already as a city at the tune of over $1 million a year. And so for them to have asked for more money just really struck me as while they are a very important institution in our community, and I have attended and grew up attending classes at the Bowers, I don't think that's very fair for them to request funding when they're double dipping in a sense.
If we move forward with the sponsorship, may I suggest that that U.S. Commission can talk about what that application would look like, and I think if you come up with that, then it could be more equitable to have criterias, maybe, I don't know, budget caps for organizations. Any organization making over a certain amount cannot apply. I'm just making this up, but something like that, where if you all come up, I think it would be a very strong application to put out.
Yeah, I agree. And I was actually going to propose that if we were to get this and if we were to move forward with it, we could have like budgetary constraints. If your organization has a annual budget of 500,000 or greater, you get put in a different pool than organizations that make less. And we have these buckets. That way we ensure that we really prioritize the buckets that we want to by allowing more funds for it. So maybe, example, for if there's an organization that's applying that has a budget of 3.2 million, the maximum they can apply for and the maximum for that entire bucket is maybe $10,000 versus a bucket of $25,000 for organizations that have a budget of less than $500,000. So that's one way that we can make it so that we restrict the way the funding flows so that we can provide more funds to those organizations and artists that have fewer resources and still bring in more projects, more art, more events into our city. Are there any other comments from other commissioners around this topic?
Yeah, I like the idea of event sponsorship. And as far as for grant writing, there is a lot of resources within the city. So Libra Mobile, I don't know how to, Libra Mobile. Yeah, it's down on Bristol and McFadden. They have a workshop dedicated to that, just solely. So that's within the city. So sometimes it's not about even resources, it's resourcefulness. You can go online and there's definitely a platform of very many ways that we can still learn how to grant write and get these RFPs out, make it more digestible for people that don't know, but also we cannot also rely on the city alone and its budgets for artists to be the sole monetary item that you're going to be looking at each and every time. And when you don't get it, like things start to fall apart. There's different ways. As a creative, we got to start looking at different avenues. When things dip down in one area, mural commissions for restaurants, go to your favorite boba shops, coffee shops, whatever it may be, places where you occupied if you're not getting paid, and then start looking at that and start, salesmanship. Hey, would you guys like a mural? I see you guys have this empty wall. It's, again, things can make you bitter or they're going to make you better. Again, resourcefulness within any individual in the creative field. Okay. Expanding sponsorships, I think it's great. I mean, I didn't know. I would want to know what that looks like in the future. Like, given examples, like I'd like to see more of that. Yeah, that's all I say.
In light of some of the challenges we've experienced with supporting our local artists, I would like to see that we, if we are at a point where we can divvy up the funds, that we ensure that we invest more in our artists and perhaps create a second category for grants that would fund maybe organizations or that want to engage in arts projects, but that we really reserve, as a way to make amends here, really reserve funds, not just for artists who live. I like the idea of living and working in Santa Ana very much, but for individual artists and then maybe like organizations, because we did see they were all bundled together in previous rounds. And I also am curious, I know capacity is tight in the Arts and Culture Office, and we don't apply for grants like other cities do. And so I'm curious if this funding could possibly be used to support a grant writer. And I'll share an example. The California Arts Commission, Arts Council recently released funding, wasn't very much, but funding for to designate arts districts. And in the past, winners had been Little Tokyo in downtown LA, Barrio Logan, Emeryville, gosh, they had a fun name, Dump City, I think it was called, really kind of, spaces. And Santa Ana just seemed like a natural fit for such an opportunity. I happened to reach out to a few arts leaders that I know, and everyone said, we just don't have capacity, especially right now. And so, and not to mention that the city would have to be involved in such an application. And it just, occurred to me that if we won't be competitive for any kinds of opportunities like this, and we can't really bring in more resources to fund more arts projects if we don't invest in such a role or such a person to do that. So I would like to suggest that we consider trying to bring more revenue for arts into the city very explicitly by doing so.
Yeah, those are great points, and I very much agree with the looking into potentially setting aside some of those funds to have a grant writer that could apply for these statewide grants. I actually recently applied to be on the board of California Arts Advocacy. So we'll see what happens. But part of what, the questions were like, what would you like to do on this board? It's like, well, I'd like to be able to, bring more funding for Orange County, and, in Santana, but just Orange County. LA gets a lot of love, San Diego, all these, big places. But, why couldn't we be an art district? And, looking into how we make that happen would be really important. So I'm definitely trying to, myself connect more with the statewide movement to apply for grants and to be aware of them and bring folks into that. Chair Vu that mentioned earlier about the pools of funding. I think that's a great idea. Being able to write in the applications, if you are, whether, and also Commissioner Russell around organizations versus artists, and having different pools for that, and organizations that make more than whatever, 500,000, $1 million, whatever, that, and those that do less, so that, that there's equity in that way. Yeah, I think there's a lot of good ideas that, we're talking about here as far as, but, as Commissioner Ochoa, sorry, I had to look at him. Commissioner Ochoa mentioned, yeah, there are, there is also a need for artists to, to diversify their approach to trying to connect with places and spaces that can educate them and teach them. There are art resources out there to become better grant writers and all these things. But I'm also curious to be able to have a specific, maybe that's an RFP specific for that, or workshops to do grant writing for arts to be one of the, like, the things that can, we can be specifically like, that's what we need to happen with this money. Because, as we're funding, or groups, then that just helps everybody out. So yeah, I think, and I don't know what this looks like, Chair. Perhaps, speaking of ad hocs, I mean, this ad hoc would be something that I'd be interested in being a part of if that's what it's going to take. Maybe working with Tram, taking the feedback and the conversations here to to kind of iron it out and seeing what it is that we can do to make sure that, like, we have these different pools and we have the maximized ability to to fund big orgs, small orgs. Yeah, I as far as the Bowers Museum, I don't support the double dipping. I think a lot of us, like, just individually, we felt and we voted accordingly, you know, when it came to like wanting to give funds or not to organizations that we knew were, you know, had a lot of money. You know, I'd look at who was on their board, you know, if I see banks on there, like, I'm just like, yeah, like, perhaps we should fund other folks. So we were doing that already, but perhaps that's something that we can, like, you know, outline more specifically about, you know, and because there's also grants, like organizations like the Grand Central Arts Center that could apply for a grant and they'd be great, but they're like, we receive money from here and from there, and, you know, so we don't need to, you know. I wish other or big orgs would just do that. But, you know, of course, that there's money, they're gonna go get it, but they're the big fish in a small pond, whether it's in arts or nonprofits. That's a tale as old as time. But we can and should do more to you know, promote equity, and I think we have some good ideas here. So, you know, interested in what can be taken from this conversation, and then how we can continue it, or if that, yeah, what the next steps looks like.
Commissioner Ochoa, do you have any additional comments or questions? No. Then that basically concludes our preliminary discussion. Thank you everyone for these ideas that we're populating today. And thank you ahead of time, Vice Chair Hernandez, for pre-volunteering to be on an ad hoc, should that be created once the budget gets approved and confirmed. I have noted that and I will keep that in my thoughts. We'll come back for this discussion next month when the budget will be confirmed, and we'll actually be able to discuss with numbers. And I don't imagine that we'll be able to land on exactly what we're going to spend our funding on within that first month. I know this is going to be a drawn out conversation as we really confirm what these priorities are, touch base with our constituencies, and then come up with the equitable processes to not only reach out to applicants, but also to then rate, grade, and then disperse these funds also. So I'm looking forward toward this process to really show how we can make the best use of funding that we've not seen before at this commission. So really want to hope for the best with this funding that's coming in. And with that, does staff have any comments they wish to share with the commission?
No, Chair.
And does the commission have any comments they wish to share? Commission members, please note that no member may speak more than once until all have had an opportunity to speak, and the commission may limit our comments to 3 minutes each.
Yeah, I just I want to thank my colleagues for, you know, the conversations, and, you know, even when we disagree on ways to move forward, I think, you know, in general, we all want what's best for our city, and so um, it's definitely different than perhaps, you know, the other body that meets here, engages in with each other, and disagreements and such. So, you know, I thank everybody for the comments. You know, this week and these couple weeks have been a real trying time for you know, for the community, for Latinos, specifically, you know, for the city. You know, like, you know, as many folks in the community, you know, I went out to the protests, and, you know, and I engaged in my First Amendment right, you know, to free speech and to protest, you know, my government against these vicious and violent ICE raids that are terrorizing our community. And we saw leadership, and we also saw lack of leadership, which is unfortunate because, you know, in this moment, we could have and should have, and perhaps we can still have a unified message that, you know, stands, like, puts differences aside and says, like, we need to look out for our community. We need to support them and protect them in any way that we can. And we need to make sure that our police department is not engaging in violent acts against, you know, community members that are just exercising their freedom of speech. You know, and being able to mitigate what the reaction looks like when there are people throwing things or such. You know, I'd never gotten, you know, pepper sprayed, you know, like, I've been around that, and this past week was my first. So it was kind of like, oh damn, you know, this is what repression looks like. You know, it's like, smells like fascism, from like that video. So, you know, like I know that our police department is not engaging in immigration raids and, and whatnot, but, they are cleaning up and really, making sure that our, community is not only facing this, this terror from the federal government, but also, from our local police departments. So, this is again continued conversation in our city. What do we want to prioritize? We want to prioritize investing in youth, proactively eliminating, avenues towards delinquency or gang, life and such, or do we want to, just reactionarily, vote and approve more money for more cops, for more militarization, and a lack of accountability, even when, we've seen, and even council members face themselves, this aggressive attitude towards our community members. So, and I say all this then with the kind of thought that this council, this commission, and us and as individuals, we're going to play a big role in the coming weeks and months and years to be able to heal our community from all of this collective trauma that we're going through. And art is going to play an immense role in all of that. It always has, and in prior moments from the 60s, to World War I, World War II, and we're in those times right now when art is going to be a vehicle towards being able to heal all this that we're experiencing. One of the things that I learned from going to the state convention with California Arts was that there's a big push and advocacy for having insurance paid therapy, art therapy that is paid for by your insurer. It's like, yeah, you go talk to, a psychiatrist or a therapist, that's good. Like, get your words out. But sometimes you just need to draw. Sometimes you just need to act. Sometimes you just need to paint, sometimes you need to dance. And that's part of it, because part of our resistance is joy, and so we need to show that joy in our resistance. And I think that that's what we as a commission will be able to help fund in the new cycle and address some of these things. So, yeah, I'm hopeful for the future, but I'm also really cognizant of the fact that every day we are hearing about our community being under attack. And so my heart goes out to them, and we all must do whatever we can, whether it's giving folks rides or helping folks do grocery shopping and just supporting it in whatever which way our community's in this moment. So I couldn't leave this meeting without just acknowledging the dark realities that we're in, but also the responsibility and duty that we have as commissioners and as members of this community to help ease the pain in whatever which way that we can. And art is the way, as my little pin says here. Culture is healing, creativity is hope, art is health. So, thank you, staff, for this meeting, and thank you to my colleagues for indulging me and being able to serve on this board with y'all.
Thank you for that. And thank you for helping to bring many artists. It was such a beautiful demonstration of our power as artists and our love for each other at an event last night. And you really you were a gatherer in a way that is so important, and I want to honor that. I also want to say that my dispute with the Sawayo Mural Project is not about the project. I am incredibly honored that I live in a city that said we have this funding and we'd like to use it not only just to honor this. I know it's a business relationship in some respects, but really to bring artists together. I believe, again, a historic amount of money. I feel so honored that the city would believe in an idea like this, would want to do this. Obviously, this idea was conceived of before the moment that we're in right now. But I was there at the plaza where the mural will be just a few nights ago with my family. And we were sitting there, there was no one there, except for another young family. And so my young child started playing with their child, and there's a stage there, and it gets used as a jungle gym when it's not a stage, if anyone doesn't know that from the city. And so the children are running and turning on top of the jungle gym, and I just sat there staring up at that mural space and imagining what story that mural could tell. I hope that what story that space will tell that young family if they were to ever gather in that space again, because I know there was fear, and I know there was a sense of, who is this other family? And I just really believe that our community is coming together in ways I've never experienced in my whole life here. It is so beautiful. The kindness and the generosity is unprecedented, I think. And I also want us somehow to capture that, what is happening right now on that wall, so that everybody who goes to that plaza will know that this is who we are as a city, that we take care of each other, we love each other. We come from beautiful, incredible backgrounds and histories and journeys. And so I really believe that this mural will do that. And on top of that, I also challenge the city, our city leadership, and I will follow up by challenging them myself, but I want to challenge them from this point right now to revive this idea and to revive this significant amount of funding for a future arts project that might become a even tradition here in the city, that would memorialize, again, a history of struggle or triumph, or just cultural connection. It doesn't have to be an international one, but maybe focus on a different genre every year, but to really tell stories of Santa Ana so that our young kids who live here know the stories of this city. And it's not just a plaque, like I live near the Chinatown plaque. It's not just this little plaque that you don't really notice. I want it to be bigger. I want it to be a story that's vibrant, that could even be incorporated into our school curriculum that now has an ethnic studies focus. And I just think that there's such an opportunity for our city to make that happen. And I want to challenge our leaders to do that.
Thank you to all my colleagues today for really, really robust conversation, as we always have, and like the most respectful way that we can move forward together, while still all of us having the best for our communities in mind. I really, truly believe that. And thank you to Vice Chair Hernandez also for bringing up everything that's been happening in our city, in our state, in our country around immigration right now. I know that people are very deeply impacted across all communities. Every ethnic boundary there are no ethnic boundaries in this. Every community is touched and hurt and traumatized by this. And in thinking about how, like, the role of the arts in this, I can already see it happening. There have been several events that were meant to bring people together for resource sharing, for arts, for children to come play and learn something new, that have gotten canceled because of the fear that the federal government wants to instill within our communities, so that we see each other as strangers, so that we distrust one another upon sight, so that we don't engage in conversations, so that we cannot come up with new alternatives and pathways forward. And I know that the pathway forward is to say no to all of that, to reject every single one of those premises, and to say, despite all of this, despite every single one of our differences, we commit to being in this place together and building this new life together for one another. Whether we want to or not, what's happening now, what has already happened, can, will, and already has begun to change our city's culture. And it's up to us to determine which direction it actually takes as it changes. And I echo Vice Chair Hernandez' directive to us all to be involved in every way that we can be, in every way that feels right for us to be involved in this struggle at this moment. And if not this moment, a later moment, if you were previously involved, whatever it is, like, I encourage everyone to be involved, to be organized, to join an organization, to raise our collective voices together. And together we can then create, and what is art if not creating, right? And what could be more in the soul and the heart of art than creating the place where we live together with one another. And so I'm committed to being in this for as long as I possibly can, and really hope to see as many of you as I can for the rest of this struggle, as long as that takes also. And with that, thank you all for your comments, your attention, discussion, your presence here today. This meeting is officially adjourned. The next regular meeting is scheduled for Thursday, July 17th, 2025 at 5:30 p.m. Take care and be safe.